in this case, I think the chapter does a pretty good job in the PowerPoint of describing what a use case is. Don't overthink a use case, especially at the level that we're coming from and in this class. Use cases and interaction with the user in the system, right? User logs in, user checks grades, user posts tech prac. I'm having you do some in the context of using D2L. What are the interactions that you have with D2L? User cusses out D2L. Okay, that's good. What is the point of that? Because it doesn't work. And man, the last couple of days, it's been kicking our butts, and so I realize that. So we could add that as a use case. I mean that jocularly, but the point is that it's not a rocket science kind of thing at this point in design. The important thing is to be sure you capture the important ones, articulate what kinds of interactions ought to occur, and at our point in it, roughly outline how that interaction ought to take place. And from that, then the more technical people can flesh them out and decide what data structures we need, what process controls we need, and those kinds of things. So we'll talk about all these things, and they relate. They're the starting point for getting functional requirements, the starting point for building test plans, and yes, guidelines for doing them. All right, so I think I've already said this, but a use case, it's a means to express user requirements. And the analysis phase is where they happen. They're not something that my laser pointer going here. That the technical people consume them. Analysis people prepare them, right? And yeah, what activities performed and what happens to the system in response, right? And I log in, the system says welcome. There's nothing. Oh yeah, brilliant. I could have thought of that. Yes, you could have. And we'll be preparing the text-based use cases and then drawing some diagrams. So I put that down here. All right. I'm kind of repeating it. Some set of activities. Ought to be some result or change in the system, some output, something. If I do something, nothing happens, that's not a use case. But maybe a welcome, my grades are displayed, I have my thing that I uploaded added to my tech prac, and that kind of thing. All right. And usually, and it's important to think about because this is how programs are written and developed, is what triggers the use case. And sometimes the user needs to upload assignment, complete assignment. User needs to find grade. Those would be triggers or events. Sometimes events, a purchase order has come into our automated system or a web order, right? And now there's a use case that needs to happen about that. So that trigger is external. But a trigger is what causes it, usually, and we can put something like a user's inclination, right? User needed to find out their grade. That's that. And that's exactly the way to think of it. What happens in a system is this trigger ought to cause these things, right? An email to the instructor ought to cause a response that explains what happened, okay? That's event driven, right? And we're kind of got an event driven class. I try to provide some material, but boy, it's the things that you asked or the due dates that really cause us to do things. And and it's a user-oriented thing or this joint application thing, which is really, I think of them as user focus groups. Users, not technicians, is the thing. All right. Attributes of a use case, the things we keep track of. Some brief name that says log into D2L that we can look at and say, that is. We need a unique number like UC01, UC02, just so when we have 100 of them or 50 of them, we can refer to, I'm talking without having just to remember the name, just like a student has an ID number. And notice a lot of this weasel word may be assigned, right? So if we have notion that, boy, this is a high priority, we need to get this, this is a nice to have. So priority, I guess my point is when you fill out a use case template, the goal isn't to fill in every blank. The goal is to fill in the important blanks and then the ones that are relevant to what you're trying to describe. So in these mays, the priority, I don't have any context, I don't have any basis, I don't have any guidance for whether priority, leave it blank. Better not leave the name and number blank, okay? All use cases involve an actor, okay? A lot of our use cases are going to be the user. Sometimes we have D2L. okay, the system, right? What is it that is interacting with the use case? Already talked about a trigger, but then would be formal. What event? And you'll see some examples that you write in. Oh, here's why that use case happened. Right, so here's some squinto-type, and you got something out of the book, but there's a use case name, there's a use case number, there's a priority, and just looking at this, it almost explains anything you need to know about how to do a use case, okay? Oh, what are the preconditions for requesting a chemical? Well, we've identified the person. Okay, they have necessary training to handle that chemical. We know what our supplies are. So, the person writing this says this isn't going to make any sense if we don't have these things in place. And this is a fairly detailed use case. Okay, yours, don't worry if your first ones aren't all this detailed. But what is the normal course of events? Blah, 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 blah. Okay, and they have a column over here, identification for steps. We've got to have a slightly different format. Don't let that throw you. But the idea is, this is normally what happens. This. All right? You may include alternative courses. This is an alternative course. What if we don't have all that's available? Okay? What if the grades haven't been posted yet? Okay? Then here's an alternative course. But now here they're spelling it out. We don't want to lose this customer, say, or forget this thing. So we do something different. When the quantity is less, then we can they follow this. They say, oh, well, will you take what we have, and then we do something about setting up a new order. So that's describing what this business, this entity wants to have happen in that case. And you can have lots of alternative courses. For our course, I mean the course we're taking, not courses of action. Let's concentrate on sometimes what I call the happy path, right? The normal course, kind of how do you start? What's the use case for starting a car? Well, gosh, it's getting different with nuts and everything, but insert key, turn, car starts, put in gear, go, right? That's the normal course. What if the key breaks in the ignition? What if it goes wah, 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 wah? What if I turn it and I don't hear anything but a click? All those are great alternative courses, but the normal course happens 999 times, 999,000, out of a million, once or twice, okay, we get something else. So this is important. This is less important. Valuable, especially if there's an important alternative, but don't stress this, stress this. There ought to be at least one or two post conditions, right? And sometimes it's like a grade check, grade is displayed. Something that's checked, maybe a log entry is made that the person checked it, but what is the change in the system, and maybe even display that occurs because of this, and the exceptions are a little like alternative courses, right? Why might we not be able to execute that particular use case, right? And posting grades, I don't know. There are no really exceptions to that. We might have some alternative course, the grade isn't ready. It's not so much an exception. D2L is broken, but I wouldn't list that. Okay? And then this they have places for what are some of the items, the data items that would be needed on input and output. So, gosh, make something like that. And I don't want to diminish the intellectual and background it takes to do one of these, but you are more than capable of coming up with these. And it really is something that you've got to drive, right? Your description, your understanding of what goes on is the paramount thing. There's going to be a lot of correct use cases. It's not like what is 2 plus 5 and the answer is only 7. It's going to be more on what needs to happen. Okay. Good. And so I already went through. If you don't know what preconditions are, read the book. Things that need to be in place before we start. Happy path, right? Okay. What happens most of the time? This is if there's some important alternative courses. If this doesn't work, what ought to happen next? Wouldn't spend a lot of time, especially on the first thing through, thinking about all the ways the thing can break. That's not unimportant. It's not important now. Okay. How are things different by the time these things are effective, right? What errors could occur along the way? Exceptions, right? Unusual occurrences, and if you can think of some real ones, the exceptions, document not uploaded, error, just D2L, throws an error or something, would be an exception. You might just highlight that affects the outcome of the use case, and in this particular format, here are the fields, the data that is involved. Right. Right. Instructions may be included. When you look at different ways to do use cases, which is why I wanted to use a template that wasn't in the book, to realize that this isn't a specific thing. The concept is important, but and we might have some business rules or requirements, notes and issues, and this is the daily use case as needed. That you can come up. There's the business rule. We don't buy from Microsoft or Apple or something like that. That does, or we have to get approval from Miss McGillicuddy to get an expense. So again, anything that may think about, is this important for my particular thing I'm trying to describe? And if it isn't, then I would say if it isn't, then leave it out. Okay, include just what's important. And the idea that use cases, then, a system is often a chain of use cases. So this exemplifies 3 use cases. We describe, okay, how do we authenticate? It's like log into D2L. I want to check my grades. I want to post an assignment. There are different use cases that collectively help define the scope and requirements, or help provide the basis for defining the scope and requirements. So, realize that the use cases are the interactions. It's not, and the collection of them describes the system. Okay, I've been talking about naked. Don't make your use cases naked, but they don't have to be full dressed. They can be wearing jeans and a t-shirt and don't need a tux and a top hat. Okay, or the ladies a ball gown. Okay, you can wear jeans and a t-shirt too. And that's where we really are. Get the sense of what a use case is, and then you can always refine it. Okay, and that's where bringing them to a joint application development or a user, it's a nice follow-up for an interview. Okay, based on our first interview, I kind of see this as the way you outline that process. Do you agree? And it's something that a user can, more casual use case format is acceptable. Yep, on our project it is. And so this one has a little bit less material, right? And even if they left something a little blank, if you left exceptions blank, because you really can't think of any relevant ones, I can buy that. Okay, I think we talked about, I'll always have a name, I'll always have a number, I'll always have an actor, should always have a description, a trigger, and a normal course. Preconditions may be obvious. Logging into D2L. That's preconditions. User knows their login ID. You could put that. D2L is there. They have a computer hooked to the internet. The internet is working. The Wi-Fi hasn't brought. You don't have to get in that kind of detail. Precondition is for logging in. I would say there really aren't any. They're just so obvious that we don't have to go there. Okay, and good. Use cases are from the user's point of view. They don't get into technical requirements and some of the other non-functional requirements, but that's the contributions. That's what we do, or systems analysts do, is take that. And that is a challenging step that we'll play at in this course. I don't know. We would need to follow on and work together to really do a job of taking use cases and turning them into functional requirements that somebody can code from, and that we're still at nomenclature, right? So functional requirements give help to the developer about what the system ought to do, and that analyst is between the users and use cases and the developer and the requirements and specs. Okay, so this is now getting to functional requirements from a use case. All right. And so that helps the developer understand what to do. And then there'd be another step where this turns into some data documentation and some process documentation for how we're going to make all that happen. Okay, so use cases lead to functional requirements. A lot of overlaps. It kind of looks like the normal course. But now we're getting specific: update, print, send, record. That's all this nice verb kind of stuff in requirements. But the realized functional requirements follow from use cases. And so how do we do it? Identify the major use cases, right? and almost just come up with just give it a number, give it a name, give it a description, and then brainstorm all the possible use cases before you start diving deep. Okay, and so good advice there, book, and then take the use cases one by one, and what are the major steps, right? Fill in the normal course. And there's some good questions about, that might lead to the result of that. Some good questions if I was doing an interview of students, administrators, and faculty. Some ideas, okay? And where do they all you break it down? We're doing analysis here, getting into more detail. Okay, what is triggers, inputs, and outputs, and validate. Walk the user through. Walk through it mentally. Does it make sense? Try to visualize the interaction. Did you leave anything out? Yeah, then put it in. All right. Yep. You can read it, right? It's functional requirements. Maybe modified in more detail. Right. So we had some requirements, and then we got the use case help reflect some light on it. So we had some initial understanding, and then we got it in a little bit more detail based on what we saw. Okay, that's the job of analysis. I know we all like to write it down, turn it in, get it graded, and forget it. In this business, it's a constant cycle, constantly updating and keeping them fresh and making sure everybody has the latest ones. And it's like writing a document or something. So that's just the nature of the business. So that's all right. So use cases aren't a complicated thing. There's a summary, what triggers it, major steps, what changes. Okay, and we can't do this. We can say it, and y'all did some good question answers. Oh yeah, have the users role play, and that's good. And have them walk through and read it like a script. I say no, maybe there's a step I left out. All right, so.